Good morning and welcome everyone. I am Fernanda Hurtado. I'm the CEO of Fundación Generación Empresarial. Over the past 25 years, our foundation has worked to promote ethics and integrity for businesses and other private and public institutions. We work to strengthen compliance cultures, measure the impacts of best practices, and share knowledge and experiences, both locally and internationally. We're delighted to co-sponsor this event with Colombia Global Centers in Santiago, represented by Karen Poniachik, and I hope this will be the first of many collaborations. We are also pleased to have Eduardo Pooley, CMO of Bank BCI and member of our board, commenting on local trends. Today, we would also like to warmly thank Myriam Sidibe, our special guest from Nairobi. When facing crises like the current one, companies need to look into their core and definitions. They have to respond to the challenge of being the key players that society expects of them. The way to overcome crisis is through purpose, which acquires even greater relevance today when we are dealing with the impacts of this global pandemic with regards to public health, unemployment, and increasing poverty rates. We need to join forces to return to the path of growth, but we also must build upon a new social consensus where trust will be one of the main drivers of our society. Now, Karen, I'm turning the screen to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fernanda. Good morning in Santiago. Good afternoon to Myriam in Nairobi. We're thrilled to host this conversation with you in association with Fundación Generación Empresarial. Myriam is the author of Brands on a Mission, How to Achieve Social Impact and Business Growth Through Purpose. It's just out, it's available in Amazon. Talking about Myriam is to talk about big numbers. She is Unilever's Social Mission Manager on sabbatical, a position that we could eventually incorporate in our companies in Latin America. So we want to know more about what social mission managers do. Myriam created the movement to change the hand washing behaviors of 1 billion people, which is considered the single largest behavior campaign in the world. She did a TED talk about this experience, and that video has been seen over 1 million times on YouTube. She is one of the brains behind the Global Hand Washing Day, recognized by the UN and now celebrated in over 100 countries. Thank you, Myriam, for taking the time to speak with us today. We consider ourselves extremely fortunate to host you, considering that yesterday you were interviewed by Forbes and a few weeks ago by the Harvard Business Review. So without further ado, I turn over the screen to you. By the way, we'll be taking questions via the chat room. So Myriam, the screen is yours.
Thank you so much, Karen. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today. So I'm just going to share my screen. Hopefully you can see it now. It's a real pleasure to be sitting in Nairobi and actually feel like I'm in Santiago, Chile today. So I think it's an honor to have been invited at the by the Global Center today, and then to be able to share some of my work, but also to get a chance to to get questions, but also to find a way to share this knowledge and this this passion that I have across the world, all the way to Latin America, starting with Chile. So a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to take you through my journey, my own journey of having not only written this book, but having spent 15 years in the world's largest soap manufacturer. So what I'm going to take you through today is what Brands on a Mission really means for me. And as a starting point, you need to realize that I have spent over 20 years dreaming of ways to get people to wash their hands with soap, and it's the most cost-effective public health intervention there is. But it really just took COVID-19 to get people to listen. Hand washing with soap is the best line of defense against COVID-19, and it definitely will remain so even after we find and we discover a vaccine. Health and well-being is the foundation of social justice. For me, it's the most rewarding business investment in every sense of the term. My years studying brands with purpose have focused around health and well-being, and I've concluded what many have before me. It pays to be good. And what I want to do today is take things a bit further when I tell you how to make a good pay. Health and well-being ranges from promoting hand washing with soap, to general hygiene, to better nutrition, to safer sex, to tackling self-esteem, to body confidence. And I would go further and say that racism itself is a public health issue, a mental health issue, and a disease that has to be treated and tackled with the same level of consuming energy. You know, and if you look at the recent events in the US, have made that even more apparent. The deep roots of centuries of inequalities must be tackled. You know, I believe in pioneering new ways to address health and well-being, and I've experienced firsthand what brands can do to address them. You know, I call the brands that stand up brands on a mission. And brands that do will come out of this very well. Others will fall fast, and I think they'll fall very far. In the past few weeks on the streets of America have taught us that it takes years of commitment and dedication to be a brand on a mission. Ben & Jerry's ice cream, for those of you that know this brand, can speak with confidence and authority on America's current reality, since you know, they've actually been working on this since the civil rights movement. They've supported work towards racial equality on several fronts, whether it's education, housing, inequality, income inequality, and the criminal justice system. And you know, if you look at their board, this sensitivity is also reflected. They have supported work among Indigenous Americans too, financially and with legal aid protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline, for example. They have worked with the LGBTQ community. In 1989, long before it was legally required, they extended health insurance benefits to partners of their LGBTQ employees. They have credibility across the board, and the work has been rewarded. You know, without having to make a long, elaborate statement on how the profits would be used, they launched a new ice cream flavor in the middle of George Floyd protests, Justice Remix, and their customers have welcomed it with open arms. They have another flavor that I really like also that's called Pick and Resist. That's a, you know, a flavor to stand up to Trump, but that's just me. I believe that all brands need to get on a mission as a business imperative or be left behind. And in this talk, what I'm gonna do is show you how to distinguish real mission from just purpose washing, as I like to call it, or window dressing. And I'm going to show you how to do it. I think the simple fact that you are listening to me today is probably means that you are one of the believers. It means that you are interested in transforming businesses from within, that you're interested in using businesses as a force for good. Now we need to transform this commitment into real tangible action. And what I'm gonna do is give you concrete ways to translate these ideals into ways to be good. And we've chosen, you know, to make that change through the power of business. And then I think key to that is to demonstrate that it pays to be good. It's not enough to just be good. It needs to pay to be good. You know, I think that's absolutely critical. So in the last 2 minutes that I started this speech, 24 children under 5 have died, largely of preventable diseases. And I think that's fundamentally wrong. It's not just sanitation. Malnutrition, including obesity, as well as undernourishment, affects 1 in 3 people. Oral diseases such as cavities are the biggest cause of school absenteeism and low productivity. 37 million people are still living with HIV/AIDS. 80% of girls express body dissatisfaction, which often leads to low self-esteem, depression, and substance abuse. Toxic masculinity and unhealthy stereotypes are fueling a rise in depression among young men alongside domestic violence. Many of these issues can be addressed by changing habits and attitudes. An estimated 2/3 of healthcare costs are driven by lifestyle choices. We know that people at risk of HIV infection should be using condoms, that we all should be washing our hands with soap and brush our teeth before going to sleep, that we should exercise more and eat better. Yet we often don't have in our best interest this desire to do so. And we know what's good for us, but we often act otherwise. And it is this disconnect between what's desirable, health-promoting behavior, and our actual day-to-day habits is the source of many of the world's pressing public health challenges. And I think brands on a mission can right those wrongs. Marketing as a discipline that used to be considered evil can make consumption conscientious and improve both society as a whole and individual customers. Many brands have come around to the idea of having a purpose. The Business Roundtable recently issued a statement of purpose, which basically had 181 CEOs signing up, in the US. It concluded, each of our stakeholders is essential. We commit to deliver value to all of them for the future success of our companies, our communities, and our country. This represents obviously a clear move from shareholders to stakeholders capitalism, ranging from employees to communities in which they operate. If you look at BlackRock, which is probably the largest investment as well, Larry Fink recently said, and he told companies in which he invests, that profits are in no way inconsistent to purpose. In fact, profits and purpose are linked. So, I keep questioning and wondering and saying, if some corporations are becoming larger than some nation states, we need to think of a new model of enlightened capitalism. I've called it compassionate capitalism. I've called it considerate capitalism. I've called it empathetic capitalism. The point is, for me, we need to find out how do we link real business models with alleviating real suffering? And what can brands and marketing do to help? Profits, while essential over time, are not people's main motivator. Stating a purpose for a brand is one thing, but there has to be action too. The billions of marketing dollars from food companies, for example, have contributed to rising obesity and heart disease. If you think today, corporations are probably responsible for some of the most serious public health problems that people face. And I think they alone have the global power, reach, authority to change this. And if you can show an alternative in which doing good is still profitable, you could change that dynamic. The purpose journey that I'm sharing with you today does exactly that. If you think about brands on a mission, they go beyond talk. They strive for direct impact. And in my book, what I talk about is basically brand say and brand do. And those are terms that have been used widely in Unilever, where I've worked for over 15 years. Brand say involves communicating to consumers about social purpose. Brand do is about translating that purpose into actually addressing social problems. And I'm going to use this baobab that you can see behind me right here on this wall to help you transfer your burning commitment into this practical reality, from brand say to brand do. And I think if you use this method and this framework that I have developed to define your purpose, encourage your colleagues to do so, you'll be obliged to think deeply about your purpose and start to live it. But I think I want to start with a story. When I was 10 years old, I fell into a septic tank. I couldn't get out. I flailed around the dark, screaming for help, and sure I would die. I nearly drowned in shit. So this is a picture of what I looked like when I was that age. I was in Mali. This is my country, my home country. I still remember the taste, the shame like it was yesterday. It remains probably one of the worst days of my life. But it was also one of the best days of my life. It kicked off my career in health and hygiene, a career that has taken me all over the world, from Boston to Bujumbura, London to Mumbai, from public to private sector. I think because I fell in that toilet septic tank, I was inspired to do what I'm asking you to do. I was motivated to spend decades of my life getting rid of shit, literally. I think whether it was by building toilets or washing hands, but that is the do good part. Of course, I didn't want anyone else to have that same sensation, that near-death experience, that burning shame. I could relate to the 2 billion people that still lack a toilet. But there's more to my career than that. I studied at some of the world's greatest universities. I started at an NGO in Burundi, in Africa, in the central part of Africa, building toilets, hand-washing facilities in war zones. Many of them, remained absolutely unused, as people preferred open air to our toilets, often using them for storing grains or keeping their suitcases. But something just didn't feel right. I mean, we kept talking about beneficiaries, and this was a term that really bothered me deeply, as did the constant focus on the donors who paid for everything. It was like my success, or our success, was actually depending only on writing grants application for funding, and those grants measured success by how many toilets we built. And I kept seeing a lot of empty toilets as the beneficiaries weren't using them. I wondered, was my career going to be constantly chasing donor money to build unused toilets? Was I going to make decisions for powerless people? As a young African woman, I wanted to be a part of the development of my continent, but my work felt undignified for the beneficiaries and unsatisfying for me. So then, if the humanitarian route wasn't for me, what else was there? So I went back to school. I equipped myself with a doctorate in public health from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, spent a few years researching, monitoring children washing hands, or rather not washing their hands. And then I went to present my findings to the company that had funded my research, Unilever. They offered me a job. And I very soon fell in love, not with a fancy marketeer, but with a word. And crazy as this is gonna sound, the word was actually consumer. I realized that Unilever didn't treat its audiences as beneficiaries, but as consumers. And instead of offering these hand-me-downs and pity, Unilever treated consumers, however vulnerable they might be, with respect and dignity. That's because consumers have a choice. They choose with their wallet what to do with their money. The same young African women in rural villages that the aid sector was calling beneficiaries, Unilever was calling consumers, and dedicating all its time and resources to understand what color of soap appealed to her, what fragrance her child might like. It was an exciting moment that changed everything for me. I went from giving resources to beneficiaries in Burundi who had no choice, to making solutions attractive to consumers who did have a choice, however humble their circumstances. And by doing so, I have achieved so much more than I could have done in the public sector alone. I joined the marketing team instead of the CSR team or corporate communication team that I believe replicated the same donor aid mentality. I wanted to learn everything about the 4 Ps: product, price, place, promotion, to understand the packaging that would trigger a mother to want to wash her hands, and to understand how you influence affordable but profitable pricing and the right advertising that will get her to wash her hands. This would have come to nothing if I hadn't prepared myself for battle at school, at work, and at university, and have fought these battles when I had to. You know, I grew up in a family where my parents, spent their entire professional life helping people escape from poverty. And they could not see what kind of career I would have in a corporation. And to be honest, I'm still trying to figure that out myself. And many have called me combative, difficult, the guardian of the good. But, I believe that saving lives requires that amount of passion, and most importantly, that blend of discipline. And if I think about my 15 years of Unilever, they've given me a fantastic platform from which to combat the naysayers. And 10 of those have been on Lifebuoy, the world's largest antibacterial soap. In 2008, we co-founded Global Hand Washing Day, an advocacy day now recognized by the UN and celebrated every 15th of October by 500 million people in over 100 countries. We developed the School of Five, a hand washing program that has been translated in 19 languages to teach and reach 450 million people, children, in over 35 countries. I spearheaded a movement to change the hand washing behavior change of 1 billion people over the last 10 years. I think it's by setting these enormous goals and using them to motivate this vast corporation that is Unilever that I've been able to fulfill my life's dreams of using brands to reach people at scale and with impact. I can't claim to have seen COVID-19 coming, but I can tell you that the work that we did with Unilever and with the Lifebuoy brand has been absolutely critical in trying to be able to find some of the solutions during this pandemic. Washing hands does save lives. And soap makers are indeed some of the frontline workers. They are the makers of hope. And I think that incident in that septic tank, in that sinking feeling, that taste, that shame, took me from Bamako to New York City, from Geneva to Nairobi. And as I traveled with Unilever, I learned an important skill, the skill of persuasion. I persuaded the board of Unilever. I persuaded many people in the public sector. I even persuaded our arch rivals at Procter & Gamble. We persuaded them all to put hand washing for health at the forefront of their corporate strategies. And it worked. Lifebuoy has grown 5-fold in the last 10 years. And I'm going to show you how we did it. and most importantly, how you can do it too. And my model has been the baobab tree. It's a purpose tree with 5 main roots. You know, baobab are very special to me because they come from my part of Africa, but they're known as the tree of life. Baobabs provide shelter, clothing, food, and water. And all major decisions are taken under their shade. You know, and I water the roots of my tree. I fertilize them, I nurture them, and you should as well. And the roots for me are 5. Root number 1 is, how do you get marketing to drive behavior change and still instill positive norms? You know, if I take examples from Knorr, for example, which is a bouillon cube, 100 centuries a bouillon cube that's devised a brilliant campaign to address anemia, which used local celebrity, TV advertising, song and dance to encourage mothers to cook popular beef stew with their daughters and show them how to use iron boosted bouillon cubes and plenty of green vegetables. You know, so if I look at root number 2, it's about partnerships. You know, what kind of partnerships do you need to be able to drive your business model to scale and depth? You know, if I look at what Reckitt Benckiser's Durex has done, they've done some great work on this, particularly when they partnered with MTV, you know, to encourage young people to talk openly about sex and to transform the taboos around them. You know, but I'm going to return to Lifebuoy here. To be able to reach 1 billion people, that is not possible without partnering with, you know, NGOs like Sightsavers and governments around the world. You know, just with Sightsaver, for example, which, you know, means that you could wash hands and face can reduce trachoma by 60%. You know, we managed to take the model to millions in around 33 countries. Root number 3, which is critical, is how do you use brand advocacy to stand for causes that are bigger than yourself? You know, if I take Discovery is a financial services group in South Africa, and it's a great example of this. They've used their Vitality insurance brand to encourage good health behavior. They've incentivized people to go to the gym, track their health, their well-being, and engage in communal support. Doing any of these free leads to substantial discounts on your health insurance product and substantial improvement in public health. Vitality has pledged to support the WHO goal of 100 million people to be 20% more active by 2025. And you know what? They did this with other insurers too. This is what it means to do real brand advocacy. It means creating systemic change. How can you measure your success is the root number 4. Because I believe that you measure what you treasure. So how can you get that measurement to really galvanize internal support? And when I look at brands and what they need to measure, I look at it at 3 levels. You know, the first level is at brand level. We are all in business. We need to make sure that this is profitable, that aligning to a social mission is actually driving penetration, volume, brand love, all the key business measures that you're looking at. You know, at company level, is it helping you to retain your employees? You know, I believe this is key if you want to see the change. You know, and finally, at the 3rd level, you know, is it helping you evolve into the public sector? How many awards are you getting? How much more blended financing model are you creating where you're merging donor money with marketing resources? You know, the brands that have done this have done so much better than those that have been left behind. And then finally, the root number 5 for me is how do you galvanize and get, you know, internal support within your company? And I've been very lucky. I have, you know, at Lifebuoy, you know, within Unilever to have CEO like Paul Polman and Alan Jope on our side. And I can't tell you the number of red t-shirts I've put on Paul Polman. You know, he traveled the world, washing hands with school children, shaking hands with first ladies, promoting the Lifebuoy brands with governments and thought leader. I mean, it really allowed us to show the benefits of our mission across the company. We had an all-in approach. We knew the whole corporation supported us. And I think if you address all these 5 roots of the Baobab purpose tree, you can grow from brand say to brand do, just like what we did at Lifebuoy. And I think it's really important to think about that. And I know it may sound cynical to take advantage of COVID-19, a pandemic that has killed and affected many of us. But if there's ever been a time to turn a crisis into an opportunity, that time is now. COVID-19 and George Floyd shows us that it pays to be good. Now is the time for a reset. Brands must have moral values to survive. You know, I live in Kenya. It's got a rich entrepreneurial culture. with millions of young people who create and embrace technology, a huge resource for Africa. And when I think about COVID-19 and what I've created, my latest initiative, which is called the National Business Compact for COVID-19, you know, basically it's brands on a mission at large. We have joined together a group of Kenyan businesses, the UN family and NGOs, and COVID-19 has presented us with this ready-made mission. We've made hand-washing signs in many languages. We've sent hand-washing facilities across the country. Our campaign has reached over 45% of households. In 100 days, we've mobilized over $7 million. I mean, you know, but there's still so much more we can do. And I think the SDGs give us a tool to be able to guide us on thinking about which goal, which sub-indicators, and what is the social issues that we can align with. You know, so I think it's really important for brands to be, that are scrambling to talk, for example, about race, that they shouldn't, unless they have a real moral authority to do so. That, you know, short-term support for racial minorities, for example, might mean that they make statements of support and donation to social justice. However, they need to look into long-term measures. And I think, you know, I think of entrepreneurs, and I think if you're listening to me, you probably are an entrepreneur, you know, as dreamers would do. You are the people that can lead these companies, these businesses from brand say to brand do. But you must prove constantly to your colleagues, your bosses, your team, that it pays to be good. But I think if you focus on the baobab tree, those 5 essential trees, you can make positive changes in the world. And if you think about what you know, is currently happening, corporate social responsibility is dead. We're looking at a movement towards responsible social corporation. You know, CSR doesn't cut it. Cutting a check doesn't cut it. And the likes on Instagram don't even come close. Today, we're looking for brands on a mission. Brands on a mission are the future of corporate America, the future of corporate Latin America, the future of the corporate world. And using my baobab tree to inspire your brand, you'll be able to track real impact, proving that it pays to be good. And more importantly, you'll be able to reduce the numbers of children who die, second by second, day by day, year by year, for no reasons that cannot be fixed. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Myriam. Eduardo, the screen is yours.
So tell me if you can see my screen. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes, Eduardo.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks, Myriam, for your great presentation. And for my part, what I'm trying to do is to share with you what's happening locally here in Chile regarding the brand purpose and the communications that have been done by some companies. So we put together several studies that have been shared around in the last couple of months to try to show you how companies are communicating and what are the opportunities to really embrace your purpose and use this time to really get together and help people and the society in general. So I'm going to start with this. This is a quote from a USA brands company. It has a couple of years, but if you read it, it says that the trust in companies has never been low, and expectations from the role of the brands in society has never been high. So consumers are expecting more from companies, and they're not expecting just to do your business. They're expecting companies to do more than that. That goes for the needs of the society and leverage and influence more than your business only reason. So that's the time we enter a couple of years ago. And right now that we are facing tough times, and you can see here, this is the times we are living locally in Chile. We are living kind of a triple crisis. You know, we started last year with a social instability. Then on March, we started with a health instability. And now we are facing economic instability due to these previous moments. So the last lines of the 3 moments in common, you can see down uncertainty and fear from people. People are worried about their future because of all these reasons, and they don't know what's coming next. If you see, this is a study from CADEM. In every slide you can see below at the left, where is the search, which is the study of this. And you can see that the confidence that we're coming out of this crisis as a better country has dropped to half. And at the right, you can see that almost 32% of people, 4 times more than in December, think that we're going to be a worse country than we were. Okay? So that's very worrying. And also that, of course, a lot of people are worried about their health. 60% thinks it's a very serious issue, but more people, 86%, they feel it's very serious, the employment and salary situation. So people are, of course, worried about health, but more worried about the economic situation they will face. And that's reflected in the confidence of the consumers that has dropped to the lowest issues of at least 15 years. So we are feeling this. So what's the role of the company? Which is the scenario here? What should companies do given those facts I have just presented? So companies should ask themselves, what do we exist for? You know, how do we contribute to the community? What does society lose if we do not exist? And this last point for me is very important, you see, because when you are in a company, you always feel that this company or your products or your services are very important. But if you ask consumers and you ask yourself, but if I don't exist, will somebody really care, or will just people quickly switch to another product or company? So you must think yourself this question and say, wait, which is my brand purpose? Why should we, for what we stand for? So how you move with this? First, you need to think about doing the right thing. You know, what is the correct thing? What's the right thing to do? And you need to communicate it. You need to communicate that in a realistic way, in the right moment, in the right time. And what is more important, and Myriam referred to that, communicate what you do, not what you say. You know, you can't just come out with a pretty slogan, pretty phrase, something nice to communicate if it's not really in your essence, if it's not really part of your purpose. So walk the talk or communicate what you do is really the central part here. So what's the social role of the brands at this moment, and the behavior of the companies, what they do really affects the brands. In the past, we thought that just with marketing and a lot of communication, you could kind of build a brand, an image for your brand. But now we know that the behavior of the company, more broad than your products or your marketing, is what people take. So we must evolve from an empathic and close brand, which is of course good, but we need to evolve to brands that solve real problems to the people. You know, it's not only selling my products, it's just solving real problems to the neighborhoods or to the community that is close to us. So this is a study of CADEM, and you know, from, well, which of these actions should be the ones that your preferred companies are doing to help people during this crisis. And you can see that the highest rated one is keeping your prices, not raising prices, helping your workers from inside your company, keeping the investment. So, you know, it's like people are very worried, as we told before, about the economics implications and consequences of the crisis. So if your company can align to this and can help people with real and concrete things, it will be well perceived. And this is another study we did to understand the reputation of different companies, how they are helping during the pandemic. And if you group them by industry, we realize that two things. First, how people perceive companies are helping is relatively low. You see, only 32% of the people think that supermarkets are the ones that are really helping people. Then the telcos with an 18%, and there's a big group of around 10% of the other industries, home care, personal care, drinks, banks, home, that are helping, but it's only around 10%. Worse than that, 25% of people cannot identify any brand that is showing a purpose during this crisis. But companies are communicating. If you watch the news or you watch TV, you can see a lot of companies helping. So why is this not related, this help that company thinks they're doing with how people are perceiving it. And we're going to go through some of this industry with some examples I put together to really understand the ones that are best qualified in this service. So as I told, first, supermarkets. You can see here examples what supermarkets can do. We are not touching prices, free deliveries, or a special time for older people to go and not get infected, or skip the line by appointment. So they're doing a lot of things that people are perceiving that they are helping them during the crisis with prices or with time slot to go and be safe, you know. The second category was the telcos. What are doing, even though they have been very criticized because of the quality of the service itself, but on the other side, they are giving products, they are giving free time for connections, more data, share your plan, and they're doing a lot of actions to people to get connected, even though the service is not working as good as should be, but they are trying to help people and their users in this crisis, so people are perceiving them well. Another example, for example, CCU, which makes drinks, and they shift their factories to build face shields or alcohol gel, you know, so they give them away for free to their customers. So companies are doing different things abroad their purpose or their business to share and help the communities. And of course, banks, and here, excuse me, but I'm going to refer only to my bank. I'm not going to talk about my competition, but almost every bank did something like this, that is first communication of taking care of the customers, using remote channels, digital channels, avoid to go physically to the offices, and then offering people to move for later your credit loans, your mortgage loans, for example, not paying with no interest, just to skip 6 months of loan of the credits, and special measures for the small businesses also to take special credits with very, very low interests. So very focused on our core business, but how to help customers and companies to surf this crisis, and this with a lot of huge communications through all media. So people are less open to brand messages because every company is communicating, you know? So there's a low recall from consumers from really what companies are trying to say. But some people may recall in one of these three areas, or that was what people actually recall from in this study, which is if you talk about emotional messages, okay, people will maybe recall you, even though there's a risk to have a low differentiation or maybe enter into this emotional opportunism. Myriam talked about that. Yeah. People are very smart. They really understand when it's part of your purpose, what you're saying, when you're faithful to your values, when it's or then it's just marketing, it's just a communication that you came for this moment. People really understand that, and there's a chance that if you do it wrong, your brand will be affected and you don't have any advantages for this moment. And the second area is about pricing. If you really communicate very straightforward prices, we keep prices, we have special products for you, that will be well received for people, even though it's very a tactical communication, but people are open to that. And in the case of some banks, people also came with that the third column is that you can't offer me, if you're offering me some great conditions for these loans, but in the low letter, you say in the hidden conditions, it's not real, it will come back to you. So if you're not transparent and honest, none of these communications will help your brand, and on the opposite. So how should a brand purpose be communicated? How the advertising should be? Number one, 70% of the people to be honest and transparent. That's what people demand from companies today. Don't care which is your purpose, must be honest and be transparent. Okay, and then how your brand takes care about customers or the services you are delivering, and how these services and products can help to improve people's life. So consumers they want this to be communicated, they need it, and they are open to to embrace your brand if you go in this way. So finally, this is from Unilever marketing director, maybe Myriam knows him, but I really like this, which says, companies with a purpose last, brands with a purpose grow, and people with purpose thrive. So really, it's bigger than just marketing, communications, and telling what's products. This is bigger, and this really has a higher objectives and to be part of the community and help your country and all the people through these tough times. So thanks. In 12 minutes, delivered.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. I just have a few slides and we have a lot of questions, so I'll go through them very fast. I want to talk about when business conduct does not match purpose, and just give a couple of examples of how companies sell themselves as companies that care about people, environment, or have a mission. And unfortunately, that message has not permeated into corporate culture. So one of them, this is the Vale, which is one of the largest mining companies in Latin America, a very glossy sustainability report from 2017, where they talk about what their vision is and what their values are. And they mention life matters most, we value our people, we prize our planet, we do what is right as their core values within a mission. The message from the CEO reiterated the same message again, saying that they had restructured their sustainability department to strengthen its license to operate. So Vale was selling it, but if you remember what happened in January of 2019, the Brumadinho Dam collapsed. It was a Vale dam, and it killed 270 people, mostly employees. What had happened? For many months, the leadership of Vale was receiving warnings that went unheeded regarding the safety of the dam. Employees had predicted that the dam would fail. And most importantly, and this is an expose by the Wall Street Journal, the CEO of Vale received a letter, an internal letter through their hotline saying that the dams were in danger of collapse. And instead of saying, let's investigate what is going on, he asked to identify who the quote unquote cancer was and to find him in order to fire him. So there you see an example in which your mission, your public discourse, your values did not permeate into a corporate culture, and they didn't reach the top, which is the most important thing in all this process, because you need to set the tone from the top. Another example, it just happened, Novartis. This is a Swiss pharmaceutical. They talk about their ethics, risk and compliance policy, saying that they are holding themselves to the highest ethical standards. However, last week they were fined, or they reached an agreement with the DOJ and the SEC to pay $640 million settlement because they were paying bribes to doctor and improperly funding drug purchases. Same with this person that we know in Latin America, Mr. Emilio Odebrecht. This is from their 2015 annual report, where he talked about how important the relations between the public and private sectors were, and how they should be transparent. And he also said there that Brazil has a unique opportunity to revive standards of political conduct and restore credibility of its institutions as well as its business class. However, at that time, when he was writing them, Vale was paying bribes to several Latin American countries for about $800 million. So again, this is an example. We're going to one in Chile. With this, I'll end. An example of a company in Chile, which again had a very glossy and beautiful GRI presentation regarding the sustainability. But at that time, the company was paying bribes, and they were actually fined by the SEC and the DOJ for paying bribes to Chilean politicians to influence government policies and plan. Then their CEO also was charged and had to pay a fine. And I will end this with one of the favorites that shows how conduct does not match purpose, is one by Martin Winterkorn, the chair at that time, 2015, chairman of the board of management of Volkswagen, where he wrote, "Our pursuit of innovation and perfection and our responsible approach are designed to make us the world's leading automaker by 2018, both economically and ecologically." So there we have, at the same time, they were intervening the software of their cars they were sending in the USA, so they showed that there was less emission than that really was. So again, we all know about that story. Let me unshare this now. And sorry about the beginning and the whole confusion with the PowerPoint. We have some questions, Myriam, here for you. Maybe I can start with them. Again, invite everybody to ask questions. Do you have examples from luxury brands or brands that traditionally focus on the top of the pyramid, not bottom, like wealth management, for instance, implementing missionary strategies authentically? What messages are legitimate, coherent with their business, or how do they deal successfully with this contradiction?
Okay, so I mean, a lot of my work is on health and well-being, as you've heard, right? So, but you know, there's all sorts of opportunities as well to be able to deal with health and well-being. And if you look at, I don't know whether Dove is considered to be luxury, not really, but you know, I mean, you've seen all the work they've done on body confidence for girls, for example, and trying to get them to, you know, be much more body confident so that they can address their self-esteem. So that's a very interesting one. I think I've seen some very interesting work being done with some of these companies, and I think Eduardo touched on this a bit, that transform, for example, their, you know, beer making companies or their perfume making companies into, you know, sanitizers during this time of COVID-19. But I don't think that is a mission per se. That is much more, you know, a response and a reaction to what is required. So for me, you know, when I think about having a mission and linking it to the product, it's about really standing for something that you're going to be able to, you have a measurable and objectives where you can see real interactions with your product and finding ways to link the two. I think, you know, are there any ethical questions when it comes to luxurious brand trying to address? I think I've seen some very interesting work being done on cause-related marketing. But I'd like to see more than that, because I think cause-related marketing can stay very top level. And I think the most interesting part around trying to get brands and companies to get into mission is if it trickles down into the culture, where you see real employees engagement at all levels, actually really embracing that mission and using all their resources, whether it is, you know, great minds or money or research or R&D or innovation towards solving a particular issue into society. So I think for me, that is absolutely the key. And I think this is where you'll be able to really bridge not only that divide that I talked about, but also ensuring that there's minimal ethical issues, because it becomes fully aligned on your entire value chain to be able to see whether you are mission proof, as I like to call it. And I think that's absolutely critical here. So I'm trying to think about which other examples that very, very luxurious brands I've seen. Yeah, that's about, I mean, at this point, yeah. And if I think of more, I'll get back to you. I spend a lot of time in Africa, Asia, and Latin America thinking about, you know, health and well-being at really grassroots level. So I've spent a lot of time on toothpaste and soap, on beer actually, thinking about this, but less about iconic brands.
Can you share the experience about the beer, the South African beer? I think that's very interesting.
Oh yes, of course. So I think we looked at, I did one of my case study in my book is on Carling Black Label, which is a very iconic brand that is in South Africa. That's been there, that's basically shaped the entire, I guess, culture of the macho man. And basically they were looking, and because there were so many issues of gender-based violence, and if you looked at the news at the moment, it's a real issue in South Africa now, where people have, the gender-based violence has accelerated significantly during COVID-19 at the moment. And they came up with, they wanted to influence toxic masculinity, and they wanted to really raise the profile, and also make it safe for women to be able to talk about what's going on in gender-based violence. So they created a campaign that's called #NoExcuses. And then they obviously reached, thousands and thousands of people. But most importantly, they also created what I call the real brand do, was a program that's called Champion Men and Drinking Squads, where, those champion men will be trained on key values that's required to be the men of today, which is about, peer-to-peer, not accepting gender-based violence, calling it out when you see it. And also creating all these drinking squads where people would be stopped at a certain period, and then they will be asked to go home, or they will be escorted, or there will be a certain limit. And I thought it was very interesting. So coupled with what AB InBev is doing in terms of, creating low percentage alcohol in their beers, I think this becomes absolutely critical, right? So, and I think that's where the conversations, I think, could be really targeted. And I think, it was one of my case studies that I was least comfortable on, because I was like, well, how can a product that contributes to a social issue also try to tackle it? But then as I started seeing it, and then the more they started working with it, I thought there was a real opportunity to bring them to the table to really talk about the reduction of harmful use of alcohol, right? And because I think you need to do that with with some of the alcohol companies, so they can understand what kind of strength, but what kind of opportunity for change they can really bring to the table.
Thank you, Myriam. I have a question here. Which would be your message to Chilean company leaders and board members to get them more involved in designing and implementing the social mission for a brand?
I think, I'm sure that if you look at some of the Chilean company, you'll find that a lot of them already have purpose, because they're obviously operating in communities where they source, where they operate, where they sell. So I think there's always an inbuilt response to that businesses have to do in order to do this well. But I think the difference between what I do and real responsible social corporations and is that, it goes beyond philanthropy. It's really building it at the core of your business and thinking, how do I create this business model now that really thinks and tackles about all of these societal issues, or at least a particular societal issues where my product or my services can have something to do and contribute daily as I sell them. And I think that's the question that I keep asking. Is this, how do I transform every dollar, as many dollars of marketing, into something that is, can drive positive norms and drives real social impact? And how do you make sure that you create the right partnerships with either the communities, the non-profit sectors, the government, or the private sector corporations, for example, to be able to, to address a social issue in its entirety. So not, picking in silos, but really being able to do that. And I think that's absolutely critical. I would say to them, purpose is not something you do and then you walk away from. It is a long-term commitment. You need to be resilient. You need to know that it's going to take time to get real impact. But I believe that it takes that amount of time and energies and support to get to, to be able to drive this real impact. You cannot decide that, okay, it helps, it sells today, the consumer wants to see some purpose, so therefore I'm going to adopt it, and next year I change my mind because now I feel like, yesterday I was about gender-based violence. Tomorrow I'm going to be about, LGBTQ and inequalities. It doesn't mean that all those moral values are not what you stand for, but I believe that the real, genuine, purpose-led companies have an authentic track record that can show examples after examples of real programs that they've done, where, when they talk and when they do their brand say to their consumers, they should be able to cite many examples. And if they don't, I suggest they really keep quiet until they have a few.
Do you think CEOs should, at this point, polarization worldwide, get involved in political campaigns? Paul Polman has talked about important issues pertaining, for instance, to immigration or LGBT rights, and many CEOs are now doing the same in the US. What do you think about that trend?
Well, I think it's very tricky, right? Politics, religion, it's very tricky. But I do see that, brands that take a stand, and because this is how they're built, if you look at Ben & Jerry's and how they can take political stands at the moment, they've always been like that. This is how they stand for. So I think you can't change your mind, like not every brand is meant to take a political stand, and that's okay. But I think the key point is that if you are a brand that's an activist brand and that have a point of view about, for example, we stand for no inequality, and we're going to make sure that, for example, we stand for, some of the marginalized communities, and we are going to bring their voices, then you need to be consistent with that. And then if that ends up being part of the political debate, then you have a right to be able to say something about that. I just don't think that as, the political, arena might be changing, that brands should just get up and have perspective, because I think brands are almost like individual powerhouses, right? They're like celebrities. So people look up to them. And I think unless you are really clear with what you stand, and we saw that with Goya, for example, last week, and cancel the culture. I don't know whether you heard about this, but where he, the Goya CEO, which is it's a Mexican brand, I think. It's a Mexican brand who just stood up and said, we believe that Trump's leadership is amazing, and that it's great. And then here was, so many consumers that canceled Goya, it's called the cancel culture. And, and I was just like, well, I'm not sure this was necessarily the smart thing to do. And I think you need to be clear, if this is what you stand for, you should have enough examples of what is the part in the political debate for which you want to really be standing for. Whether it is health and equality for all, whether it is, inequality and racial equality, whether it is, ensuring that, health coverage is given, whether it is, whichever way it is, you're looking at that. And I think for me, this would be my advice. So I don't advocate every time to get into the political debate, but I think if your social mission is now part of the conversation of the political debate, then I think, and then you have enough examples and contributions, then I think you should.
Well, those are the cases of two brands that speak politically, which is Nike and Patagonia. They have a clear social mission, which has a lot of, important political messages as well. Same happened with the situation, the killing of George Floyd in the US.
Yeah.
Many companies came out, most companies, I would say in corporate America, came out against racism with very strong messages.
Yeah, and very few of them could show that in their board or their leadership they had any Black people.
Exactly, only 4% of the boards of Russell 3000 were Black members of the board. So it's important to be consistent, again, with your conduct with your mission. How do you gain trust? How do you think you gain trust?
I think it's
as a brand and as a company.
Yeah, I think trust comes when you can be authentic. It's not about always having the successful programs, because we failed quite a few times, on Lifebuoy. We've done evaluations that have shown that our programs were not successful. I think it's about being authentic, that you're on a journey, that you are learning, and that you're willing to take feedbacks, and that you're willing to be at the center of this conversation. I think people are looking for that authenticity. When that authenticity is clearly highlighted, then I think people want and will understand and support you moving forward. I think that's the key that we need to look into. So I think for me, trust starts by you being authentic, by you being transparent and really sharing what you do. And I think by you being consistent, so consistently really thinking about this. Then people say, well, yeah, we know these guys have really been talking about hand washing with soap. You can show 15 different examples of, from rural Turkana to, to parts of Brazil, to parts of India and Bangladesh, where you're doing it, how you're doing it, how the amounts, the different learnings. It's part of your culture. It's part of your employees' debate. It's about creating that space where people can really talk about it and can really learn that, it's not going to be easy, because some of the partners that you would like to have, which companies are used to just paying and giving a check and then the partner stands there with a PR, in this new type of model that I'm talking about, you're working together to get better output. So this is not a partner that you're necessarily paying. It's a new type of coalition, which means that the partner might criticize you. And it is okay to take that, because ultimately you're trying to improve your model and improve your mission. So I think for me, if I were to, trust comes with, authenticity, consistency, and and transparency as much as possible.
Thank you, Myriam. We have several questions from Yanis, but they're very politically charged and don't have to do with what we're talking about. But can you tell us a little bit about what a social mission manager does? I think, that's a great position. I never heard about it before. I don't know anybody besides you that has this position.
Yes, it's a position I created over 15 years ago, and I was the first social mission manager in Unilever. Then, every 2 years I went to the leadership and said, now I need to be a director. Now I need to be a VP. Guys, I'm progressing, but that position never really existed as we started it. And I think the social mission, as far as I'm concerned, is the person who embeds the mission at the heart of the business strategy. So it sits with marketing, it supports the team, it really helps articulate how your brand do is going to be exceptional, how your brand do is going to help drive real impact, so that it can inform your brand say, and then you can give a proposition to the consumers that's going to drive the purchase intent that you're talking about. And I think for me, that is the critical element that we need to think about and say. So a social mission manager is someone who, it could be a shared value manager. I mean, if you heard shared value manager, I think it's the same, except I think it's very focused on social issues, whether health, well-being, inequalities, really driving the social angle, that purpose that a brand could take. And it's basically the guardian of that purpose. And the guardian who checks that, we're still on top of the evaluations. We have the latest scientific evidence inputted into the marketing strategy, that we're keeping, that the brand is on top of the latest conversations scientifically in the public sector world. So then takes this back, understands the pulse of what's going on and what's happening in the SDGs, and how do we integrate an indicator that will help us, track our programs. That's what a social mission manager does. It's basically the guardian of the social purpose for a brand or for a company.
Thank you, Myriam. I'll turn to Eduardo, and maybe Eduardo, you can give us your thoughts on what needs to be done in Chile. What are the main challenges with all the topics that we've been talking about?
Oof, that's a huge question.
You're not in a nutshell.
Yeah, and in 2 minutes also. Well, I think we have to talk about around that. So first, I think companies must rethink their purpose around what's more broad than their own business. Is how they can help the communities and not just their customers, but everybody around and everybody that can be touched by the company. I always remember the case of these agricultural companies that they raise pigs, you remember? And they have huge factories in some rural areas, and they were doing a great business delivering meat, but the community around that place was really poor. They were not they were not getting the benefits of having a huge company around their houses. And they started to realize that first you need to influence the community that where you are. Then you need to give and share value with all the community. And if you can share it with all the country around you. So I think from boards, they are now starting to watch in a broader view. And they need to be, as Myriam said, they must be honest. And this cannot be sent as a marketing campaign. They really need to ask themselves, how can I help? How can I help the country? How can I help the community? How I treat my employees? We haven't talked much about that, but these days, community, society is really looking companies, how they treat their own employees. And you know, in the past, I would say 5 years ago, nobody cared. And if it was kind of mixed feelings around that company being best place to work, why? I don't care. They pay them well. I don't, it's their internal problem. Now, society is happy when a company treats well their employees. So it's been good with the customers, it's been good with the community, society, employees. So I really think that society is looking companies, they should be almost perfect, and that's the problem, because if you fail in any one of these areas, you're going to be smashed on social networks or in the media or wherever. So you really need to be do well, be perceived as doing well, taking care of your people, taking care of the society. So it's not a simple question or thing to do.
But I think, Eduardo, that we have many challenges here, and that we will continue working with Fundación Generación Empresarial on addressing them. As you say, today, the issue of employees, which in the ESG concept is the S part. We probably have been focusing too much on E and the C, but have left the issue of how do we deal with our employees? How do we treat our employees? How do we deal with our suppliers? Especially at this time, become extremely important. Myriam, any thoughts before closing? Besides, maybe, do you have your book there? Maybe you can show it to us. And that's it, Brands on a Mission. Again, we can buy it in Amazon, and we look forward to reading it very much, because I think there's a lot to learn about it.
And if you are from Nairobi and we actually have the book now in the Sarit Center, a textbook center. So please feel free to do it. And if you want a 20% discount, you can register on my website on brandsonthemission.com, receive our newsletter, and you'll be able to get a 20% discount.
Thank you, Myriam.
So I think, in terms of closing thoughts, look, this has been super interesting for me. I love the chance to be able to be, to get a chance to listen to what's happening in Chile, in some of the companies, getting a chance to exchange ideas. My purpose in life is very much around, pioneer and inspire new ways to address social justice, through sustainable business. And I want to do that in developing markets. And my movement is around, driving this $1 billion sustainable capital that I'm trying to create. And I think, for me, this is a golden opportunity to be able to understand what are some of these brands currently doing in other parts of the world, and how do we create this movement that is beyond borders, and what we are learning from each other from different companies, so that we can understand why and how to make purpose real pay, and have the more examples of this, the better it is. So I'm very, very grateful and honored that you've asked me to speak today, and that we could spend this time together. I've definitely learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversations.
We will certainly, Myriam. Thank you so much.